Hey, Planeswalkers, Mythras here. Hope you're doing well and staying safe. Welcome to today's episode, my friends. It is one of my favorite days. I am so excited to be bringing you a monthly tier list here, and we are covering best of one standard for Kaldheim. So we got 20 hot new decks that we're going to check out here and see how they rack and stack and rank up. So with that, I appreciate you tuning in. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel down over there, and additionally like the video, my friends. I do have timestamps down below for you, as well as the tier list. So there's your hint. You guys can go ahead and check that out because that is what we'll be talking about first. Then we'll talk about some observations and trends. And then lastly, we'll talk about some of the key decks and some of those impactful decks that we certainly do want to chat about briefly here at a high level. Now, before we go ahead and talk about the tier list here, I just want a quick call out in terms of the channel. I do plan to cover more of a weekly analysis, so I appreciate everyone's feedback and support. I know that you want to get more information sooner, faster in your hands to adjust your gameplay. I recognize, as a competitive player myself and also as a casual player, you want to know other decks to play. You want to understand the trends, qualitative information as well as quantitative information at a faster clip. So that is something I do plan to roll out, so stay tuned. And I plan to do some collaboration videos around other content creators here and tie in some of the meta pieces to that as well. So stay tuned for that as well, Planeswalkers. Again, timestamps down below for you to check out on today's video. And with that, we're going to kick off into our tier list. So this is a stack 'em, rack 'em rank. I do a 1, 2, 3 session, kind of a bell curve, really about the decks in and of themselves in the list, but also against how they compete against some of the other things that aren't covered today. So if we use Zendikar's Rising as an example, I finished out after 4 months doing 100 plus decks. So today we got 20. If there isn't something that isn't covered today, we probably will get to it. So stay tuned because I'm excited to cover a lot of those things as well. And we may mention some of those decks in the trends and analysis stuff here today. So appreciate that. Public service announcement. Feel free to check out the tier list down below, my friends, because that is exactly what we're doing here for our best of one tier list right now, right here. If you do have questions or comments, please let me know down below. You guys can absolutely hop into the Discord server as well to discuss or make me aware of something at length. So with that, here's what we got going on. I will zoom in here real briefly for my old eyes here. But what we got going on for February 2021 here with Kaldheim, our tier 1 is comprised of mono white aggro, mono white Lifegain, and mono red snow. So we'll talk about this here in a second about some of the trends analysis. Then the bigger chunk we got in the tier 2 space right now, we got mono red Boast. You guys can treat this as kind of your traditional mono red aggro right now. It is still a different archetype, not super heavily played, but one that I really like. We got Dimir, Lurrus rogues. We have four color Sultai Yorion control, or the traditional Sultai Yorion control. Rakdos Sacrifice, Jund Sac or Jund Giganthasac, Sultai Emergent, Temur Ultimatum, Esper Yorion Doom, Temur Aggro, also known as the Wet Gruul deck, Mono Green Aggro, Boros Aggro, Izzet Tempo, Naya Aggro Adventures, and then in our tier 3 slot, we have Grixis Control, Abzan Adventures, Mardu, Gigantha Winata, which we covered yesterday, and then Jeskai Spells and Jeskai Flyers there for you. So that is the list. You guys can check it out down below. I have the deck links as well as the videos there for more detailed analysis and gameplay footage for you so that you guys can get a grasp on how the deck runs. And it's raw. I don't edit that information. I allow it to be as is because I think it's always important to show the decks how they run. You guys don't need to see the best of the gameplay always. You need to have a real expectation about these decks. So I'm not here to give you some clickbait and say this deck's 100% aggro win all the time, every day, day in, day out, because all of us competitive players, all of us casual players know that that's not true. So that is what we got going on for today's tier list. I hope you guys enjoy it. We are now going to go ahead and talk about a little bit more on the trends pieces, because this stuff is very important. I think as a competitive and casual player, you want to know what was there, where we're at, and then potentially where we're going, and how that kind of unfolds over time. So in terms of the trends and some of the biggest pieces that I do want to call out here, items of interest. First off, hats off. Congratulations, WOTC, Wizards of the Coast here, because where's Oko? Where's Omnath? Did we launch without a hitch? I will say yes. So for those of you that are still saying that might not be the case with some of the things like Tibble, I strongly disagree, and you can call me out in the comments if you want, but the reality is it's been a fairly decent launch. Yes, there's always some hiccups from a data perspective, from a technical perspective, but when we look at the set in its entirety, I truly believe it was a pretty smooth launch. And additionally, we've got a lot of competitive playable things. Even out of the gate, we're still brewing. We still got a lot of things to see, but I was very happy with this. So always good to mention good things when they happen, because I'm a big believer in that. So absolutely, that's one. The next key point here is what once was good is still good. This was the advice that I gave out at the end of the last tier list video in terms of what we may see in Kaldheim. I'll continue to say this as a competitive player, as a casual player. Decks that are at the top of the list continue to typically be good as you transition into a new set. We have wholeheartedly seen this here as well. In fact, those decks probably got a little bit stronger. Unfortunately for everyone else that's out there that wish there would be something smashing expectations, maybe not named Tybalt's Trickery, I'm sorry. As I mentioned, what's come to fruition is those decks that were strong have still remained strong, and there might be some continued pressure. We'll see as the meta evolves here, which is typical path. We've seen these trends move, so stay tuned, because that could certainly still happen. Lands we talked about, they have made an impact. Not as much so far in the modal lands. Yes, they've helped. Yes, I think it's boosted some decks like Sultai, both Emergent and Control. However, the big MVP here is the Faceless, in particular in Snow. So the lands that run the Snow, we've seen the impact with Mono Red. Big call out there, and we're certainly seeing it. One of my favorite things in Mono Red Snow isn't the fact that we get a 4/3, but we get the fact that it's Faceless, and it's creatureless, and essentially all creatures at the same time. So when I attack in with it's a rogue, it's also a knight, I can give it the +1/+0. I can take a card out of exile if I had my Robber of the Rich kind of a thing and get some additional gameplay. So very happy about that. Glad to see it, and we'll continue to see how this may play out. I'm certainly a huge fan of Faceless in the best of one structure. I was a big proponent of Crawling Barons in my Mono Red deck, aggro deck before. I'm a big proponent of Crawling Barons still. This gives you a nice option. I think Faceless is better in best of one. So next we have Deck Brewer's Dream. I believe this is still true, still holds true. We'll talk about this here in an expanded second, but the reality is we've seen a lot of cool decks. We'll continue to see a lot of cool decks. We'll see impacts on tournaments. We'll see impacts on the meta, things that other content creators come out with. Obviously top decks that I love covering by you guys. I think there's a lot of space left. I think in an aggro dominated market that we have right now, it opens this up to a good mid-range deck, which we're starting to see with some of the Rakdos sacrifice decks, Junsack, those kinds of things. Then it also then opens this up to some late game things, which we've certainly seen a lot more Sultai control, Sultai Yorion control, those kinds of things creeping up in best of one here. So keep an eye out on those. And with that, to expand on that in that second, I did talk about is the Viking tide going to crush the culture? And really, I think if there's any takeaway, it certainly hasn't been crushed. So we continue to see good support. We continue to see thoughtfulness in the archetypes and the launch and the release and the broader impact of Kaldheim on the Zendikar Rising meta. And we're continuing to see that expanded into this season. So very, very excited about that. Keep those things in mind. And then last but not least, I do want to call out one other piece here that I like to call the Jedi mind tricks and buyer beware. There is this unprecedented feel in the meta, and I've truly a strong believer in terms of the perception, not the reality, between two decks, Tybalt's Trickery and Emergent Ultimatum. And I'm a big fan of MTGA Zone. You guys know this. And I do pull a lot of my decks from there. I think many of you also understand that follow the channel. But I am disappointed that, and we'll talk about this when we get to the best of 3 tier list, that they put Emergent Ultimatum as their number one tier 1 deck. And I'm certainly in direct challenge to that, because I do not believe that, which you guys will see here in a minute. But again, Jedi Mind Tricks, buyer beware. First off, Tybalt's Trickery deck does not win as much as people think. You guys can watch my videos, my raw videos, where I do beat Tybalt's Trickery actually the majority of the time. So keep that in mind. Its win rate is not as high. I believe we were discussing this in the Discord server. I think it's actually sub 50, but I'll have to go back and look at some of that information. So don't give up hope. It's really about them dropping the Trickery and you guys just conceding as fast as possible. You can certainly still come back and win. So keep that in mind. There's usually a gap play after turn 2. Just keep that as you want to sit there and play through the match, just like I typically do. Then when it comes to Sultai Emergent, I actually had this as a tier 4 one from Zendikar's Rising. You guys can go check out the last release there for the meta tier list. I'll put it down below in the details for you too. But I had it as tier 4, and there was no way, even after playing it and after what I saw was in it in Kaldheim here, that it got that much better, and it didn't. So don't let anyone trick you. We also know that given some of the latest events, which I'll talk about this in some of the weekly meta things that I'm planning to roll out here, is that it was one of the most played decks in one of the, I think it was SCG tournaments here, the 5K, something like that. And it wasn't even 50% on the win, and that was part of the reason why mono red snow became more popular too and prevalent. And I'll cover some of these things in the best of 3. So please don't let the hottest new greatest shining object kind of a thing drive some of these decisions. They need to be both grounded in fact, but also in style, I like to say. So with that, last final thought here is just kind of surprises. Unfortunately, I would say there isn't really anything big, unless you'd say that aggro to aggro on the trends piece and Stain is a big surprise, but that was not what I was kind of forecasting. However, there's a couple floater archetypes out there. We'll see how those hold up. I don't think Tybalt Trickery is a surprise, and I don't think Emergence is a surprise. So keep those things in mind as well. But I do think it's never too late, and we'll have an opportunity to kind of see some more decks here over the course of this new standard with Kaldheim. So stay tuned. We got a lot of impactful things that are going to come up. A lot of players that we're going to see playing some cool stuff, and we have seen some of those things already. So just keep an eye out, and I'll do a little bit better job of trying to communicate and get that information in your hands a little bit faster. So that's the tier list, my friends. Again, it's down below. If you do have questions, comments, let me know. Feel free to hop on the Discord server. Appreciate your support. Feel free to subscribe down over there, and additionally like the video, my friends. So let's go ahead now, and we'll pivot into some of these top decks that I do want to talk about. So we're going to cover 4 to be specific. We got an Is It Aggro deck, Sultai Ultimatum, Mono Red Snow, and Mono White Aggro. 2 of these I'm calling out because one, they certainly were, whether they were a Jedi mind trick or not, have had an impact in the best of 1 meta, and then the other 2, obviously the top decks. So we do want to dive into them and kind of take a quick peek. In terms of breaking out that structure, when we do talk about the Is It Aggro deck, this one was really hot off the beginning and out of the gates, and certainly commanded a ton of respect. I believe some of the guys in the Discord server have done a great job, and I believe hit Mythic off it also. So kudos to them for sticking to it out of the gates and seeing it to fruition in terms of hitting Mythic. So you can certainly do it with this deck. This one was the top 5 one at one point. Certainly has changed up a little bit. I will throw the sideboard out here for those of you that do like best of 3. And as you know, I like to play the main boards as my best of 1 to give you that good base. But again, Is It Aggro is really about controlling the board early game and then really overrunning kind of the decks here with Gold Span and Shark Typhoon on your top end. And then you can control by direct damage or counter spelling here, and then additionally we get the uplift with the Faceless Haven here, and that was actually what I was looking for, all creature types. They're instead of the language I used before. So that's Is It Aggro. I want to talk about it. It certainly was more popular and kind of coming down from that perspective. Next, we have the Sultai Ultimatum deck. This particular version was a top 51 here. We see things like Vorniclex, we see things like Coma. Again, we get a lot of big bombs on the top end here. It didn't really change up the front end here. Valky, God of Lies is certainly new, it's certainly helpful. We have the ramp. We do get access to some land smoothing, which is always important, so keep that in mind. But I do think, at least in the best of 1 version, it can be a little bit tighter on the front end. We've talked about this. We do get Binding the Old Gods, which is pretty important and I think pretty powerful as well. So keep those things in mind. This particular version is not a Yorion version. There's also those ones as well, and several different things to think about. We also got Elrune's Epiphany here. I did not run this one. Did you guys check the video out? I was not successful with it. And again, ties into that tier 4 play like I was talking about. I just didn't feel like it got that much better. And the data, in my opinion, also shows that. So maybe slightly better on the top end because you do got some cooler options and impactful things from Kaldheim, but not, I'll say, collectively across the board. So that is Sultai Ultimatum. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that, and has been a big impact here on the meta. Next, I do want to talk about Mono Red Snow. So being a Mono Red player primarily, I'll say primarily, I do move around quite a bit, but have had a lot of success between this one and obviously Mono White, particularly Lifegain. And Lifegain rose to prominence because of Mono Red. So keep those things in mind. And Mono Red is not favored against Mono White Lifegain. But the Mono Red Snow, so if we do see some of that path, we will see Mono White Lifegain, which is already a top deck here, just one that we're not covering here in the 4. Continue to maybe rise to prominence. But in this particular space, we pick up Frostbite, we pick up Faceless Haven. They add value to the deck. Certainly, holistically, is it that much? You know, we'll continue to see, you know, if the traditional aggro outweighs the Frostbite for 3 damage kind of a thing, or if there's other stuff that we can do. We certainly lose the direct damage to the face, which can make a big difference. So keep those things in mind. We also drop some Castle Embrace for that Faceless Haven, so that could also be a trade-off. But again, this deck is really about playing curve. We get support from the Snow archetype here with some new pickups that essentially, hopefully, make the better trade-off. So that is what this deck's about. And then last but not least, my friends, we have the mono white aggro deck. This particular deck is by our friend Defor. Defor got this sucker to top 24, primarily best of 3. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the best of 3 kind of tier release stuff. But this version is still one of the top decks. Well, slight variations of this version are one of the top decks here. Still for best of 1, very important, and key takeaways here for us as mono white aggro continues to do well, hold value in play as it has from Zendikar's Rising into Kaldheim Standard. This particular version, we pick up Clarion Spirit, we pick up Usher of the Fallen, and leverage multiple drops, multiple plays, Glorious Anthem, kind of this blended White Weenies type deck. So lots of things there to keep an eye on, my friends. We'll continue to see this thing evolve, I'm sure, just like all the other archetypes that we have. So with that, this deck's about continuing to apply that pressure, getting over the top, tokens, and additionally counters, and then boosting our creatures as well. So with that, my friends, those are the 4 decks that I did want to talk about today. We've certainly got a host of them. You guys can check those out down below. You can stay in tune with the daily top decks that we do run. Top 1500, focus on the higher ranking ones first, stuff that we haven't covered, and then getting down to some of those platinum to mythics. If you have decks that you want to share with me, absolutely happy to take a look, apply the same criteria. I love showcasing your stuff and sharing that with the community, my friends. So with that, that's everything I had to discuss today. As always, in kind of a wrap up here, we talked about the tier list. We talked about what it is. We showed the tier list. We talked about some of those key trends that we've seen from Zendikar's Rising into Kaldheim here. And then additionally, I covered 4 kind of key decks or stuff that was kind of near and dear to my heart here for the first month of Kaldheim. Lots of things, as you can see. I'm still building some of these decks, still playing them, and managing the craft like all of you as a primarily free-to-play player here for myself. And as always, please don't hesitate to ask questions, here to help. Stay tuned. As I mentioned, I plan to roll out not only continue off my monthly, but give you more sound bites of information through a weekly meta analysis, additionally some collaborations for you, and as always, Planeswalkers, truly I feel blessed. I appreciate your support. I appreciate the community. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel down over there. Additionally, like the video if you like it. You can like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter and Twitch. Stay up to date on daily content like this. I am doing much more streaming. You guys can come hang out. It's my opportunity to chit chat with you in real time, and also showcase some of my distracted gaming skills and competitive skills, or just try out other decks and have fun with you guys. So stay tuned, Planeswalkers. Always appreciate the partnership and the journey. Please let me know. Again, questions, comments. Otherwise, stay tuned until next time. We do got a lot more coming your way. We got the best of 3 tier list, and I'll begin to kind of start taking a look into some of the historic decks as well, as this kind of meta evolves here for us. So with that, until next time, I am out. Say la vie, and we'll see you again, Planeswalkers.